Myanmar was one of the first to receive support from the FAO on the rollout of the VGGT, and it was very timely.
Okay, sorry. If you can first say, then if you can spell out the name instead
Oh,
of...
I did on the first time.
Yeah, but I'm not sure because there was the play.
Oh.
So use the last acronym as possible.
Oh, okay.
If it is in the same sentence, it's fine, but not everyone knows.
Okay, okay. So we do from the top. My work here in Myanmar is concerned with looking at the evaluation of the land progress over the last 5 years under the CPF. I'm particularly looking at the use of the voluntary guidelines on governance of tenure in land, fisheries and forests. In fact, it was very timely because the government was interested in producing a new land policy. So in March 2013, not long after the VGGT, the Voluntary Guidelines on Governance of Tenure, was actually issued, the FAO launched a workshop at the capital, Naypyidaw, inviting both government and also civil society. And this particular document was very relevant because it included aspects of tenure which are not only to do with economic and technical but also social. Inclusiveness is very important, participation is very important in the voluntary guidelines. Following that, the government took a period of about 2 years up until the end of 2015 to draft the land use policy. The land use policy took 2 years because the government took the decision to involve civil society in a participatory process. Now that process was a very, very fruitful process. There were consultations taken around the country, and this was supported very strongly from a group of donors including EU, Swiss SDC and also USAID, together with some leading civil society groups, including the Land Corps group, in those participatory workshops and exposures. As I recall, there were seven versions of the draft document before the final version was submitted to the President's office towards the end of 2015, and it was adopted early in 2016 and has been recently endorsed by the new government.
Always look to Federica. Yeah. Her eyes.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, could you just in one sentence tell me on the land issue that you said there was work done at the policy planning and as you said in the presentation, just one sentence, if it's possible.
Okay, the content?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah?
And like, what are the missed
Issues, yes. Okay, the land use policy took upon itself issues which are not yet covered by law. And these issues are concerned with more traditional considerations of land tenure. People's rights, even without formal land documents, are described in the land use policy.
This is good.
We'll go again.
This is good. It's very good.
So, for example, traditional rights are mentioned in the land use policy. These rights, even if you don't have documentation, formal documentation, are described in the National Land Use Policy. The role of women and the importance of women in land tenure is also strongly recognised in the land use policy. These are areas which are not yet covered by law, but the government has the intention of preparing an umbrella land use code. This particular law would then provide an umbrella for the drafting and release of new laws to replace the largely outmoded colonial period laws over the last, which is some are over 50 to 100 years old.
Okay. I ask you something because I don't know. So I'm sorry, but FAO helped with the guidelines to develop a policy, but the policy is not a law. How
Not,
do they
not,
work?
the policy's not.
A law? What are you talking?
Oh, that's right. That's right. The policy and the law are very different.
Sorry? No, un attimo, aspetta che mi
Yeah, the policy and the law are very different. The policy is a set of high-level principles, right? Whereas the law is a more structured document which needs to be passed by the Parliament, whereas the policy is a document issued by government.
Yeah. Can you explain this? How is the system in this country? So, how does the VGGT, how does the guidelines, how have the guidelines influenced the policy, and now
Ah,
we
that's a
are
good
waiting
question. Okay.
to have a
Okay.
law? And do you think if it is important, why? You know?
Oh yes.
Just
Okay,
very
I
briefly
can mention
on
that.
this.
Okay. The importance of the policy. Sorry, the importance of the VGGT, the Voluntary Guidelines on Governance of Tenure, on influencing the policy, was quite profound. Not only government but also civil society actually adopted the voluntary guidelines as a framework for shaping their particular recommendations to government on the national land use policy. We found that networks of civil societies distributed their own versions, their own summaries in their own languages and ethnic languages to their network of civil society throughout the country. So it had a ripple effect in terms of informing.
You should. And then if you can get to how this will get into the law, if it will, or how you recommend this.
Okay. So the
Try to keep it simple for people that don't know much. But,
Yeah.
But it's good. It's perfect. I love it.
okay, yeah. So the voluntary guidelines were then distributed in local language, Burmese language, of course, through the networks of civil society, allowing civil society in all over the country to provide inputs to the working groups concerned with drafting the national land use policy. So in that way there was a ripple effect of the distribution of the voluntary guidelines to civil society outside the main cities.
With this conversion to a law, how is the
Okay.
government working on it?
Okay. On the current status, the voluntary guidelines have been endorsed by the current government, and the next step will be the drafting of the national law, which will be an umbrella law to cover all aspects of land management and administration.
Why would it be important? Or
The current
are there current plans to
The current laws are very old. The current laws are colonial era laws and do not cover many aspects of modern life, particularly in the rural area. Also, the laws don't cover traditional life, such as customary title, customary attitudes and practices on land. So these will all be covered in the future framework of laws.
what is the recommendation of the evaluation on the land? If you
We haven't actually concluded our recommendations. We're at the stage of analysis and we'll be doing the recommendations over the next few weeks.
it's okay. That's
All right,
Thank you very
thank
much.
you.
Sorry.
Okay. Yeah. Water is an important cross-cutting issue, not only through the. Okay. Not only through. I'll start again. Okay. Water is an important cross-cutting issue at different levels. You can see it through the Sustainable Development Goals, through the strategic objectives of FAO, and also the reconstructed outcomes that we have prepared in the CPF for FAO at the country level. We prepared these reconstructed outcomes for the evaluation, And with all the interventions that FAO has been doing in the country, you can see that water is an important element. For example, in agriculture, in livelihood, in livestock, in dairy, in value chain, in all these sectors that FAO has been doing their projects in the country, they all have water as an important element, even in emergency situations. For example, at the recovery, in the recovery phase, when agriculture improvement practices are taking place, water is an important element. And in the dry zone, FAO has constructed a small dam and some dikes to harvest water. They have given pumps to withdraw groundwater for irrigation. However, if we do not also manage the watershed, recharge the groundwater and take care of green water, which is the soil moisture conservation aspect, we are going to lose out on all the investments that we have made. So water is of primary importance. There are very few organizations as of now working in water related, agriculture water interventions actually in Myanmar. So this is a good time for FAO to begin work on these aspects. And I think even if you see the synergies between livestock management, dairy and agriculture, the farm is managed in all these aspects in an integrated fashion. So you need to look at the fresh water use as well as the wastewater. The pollution that comes from agriculture and dairy can pollute the water resources. So when we look at managing water, we need to also not only look at conservation practices such as water saving technologies for irrigation, but also what are we doing with the wastewater? Is it going back into the freshwater resources, or do we have plans on how we are going to use that water when it comes out of the farm?
Okay, well.
Yeah?
Yeah, that's perfect. Can I just ask you to just say in one sentence that,
Okay.
as cross-cutting issues of the work of water is an element, what you said in
Yeah.
the presentation,
Yeah, yeah.
that connects
Yes.
all these sectors, and we don't talk
Yeah.
enough about
Yeah,
what
okay.
in the
Yeah.
context of Myanmar.
Yeah, okay.
Just one
Yes. Okay.
and look at it.
Yes, okay. So water cuts across all the sectors that FAO is working in Myanmar, and there's not enough discussion or enough projects and interventions done related to water. So this is a good time to really start looking at this and what needs to be done in agriculture, livestock, dairy and value chain development.
Okay, thank you. Just also in another short sentence, the challenges
Yeah.
related to water, the context and challenges in Myanmar related to water.
Yeah. So the main challenges here in Myanmar today is groundwater depletion, lack of rainwater harvesting technologies and water quality issues, which are becoming very important due to pollution from agriculture, livestock and mining. So therefore water cuts across all the interventions that FAO is doing in Myanmar. Okay? Okay. Yeah.